Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Zainab Badawi. Welcome to this event, Gender Finance, Empowering Women Through Investment. I'm the chair for this session, and we're talking, of course, about the 2X challenge ahead of the G7 summit this week. Now, as you all know, the 2X challenge was set up in 2018, was launched then at the G7 summit in Canada, and it was to increase women's economic participation in developing countries. But little did they realize at the time the catastrophe of COVID, which was about to befall the world. And that has simply underscored the absolute need for this initiative, because as we all talk now about recovering and rebuilding and trying to restore economic growth, this will be meaningless if women are left behind. And this isn't about social or moral obligations. It actually makes economic sense to give women financial inclusion. So we're going to hear some thoughts from some very key instrumental people working in this space. We're also going to have a panel discussion, and I want you also to use the Q&A function that you can see on this webinar to also give us your comments and questions, and I will do my best to try to incorporate those in our panel. So let's first of all have some opening remarks from Mr. James Duddridge, MP, who is of course the UK's Minister for Africa, and he gives us these welcoming remarks. So over to James Duddridge.
Thank you to Zainab. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here to open this very special event. Gender is an important theme for the UK during this G7 presidency. We want to build on the remarkable success of 2X Challenge, which was launched in 2018 at the Canadian G7 summit. In just 2 years, the 2X Challenge has achieved more than double its initial target. It has invested almost $7 billion across 200 individual investments in the private sector projects. It's also succeeded in driving up opportunities for women in developing countries. Today, we're coming here today to launch a new target. We want to see an additional $15 billion of support for women's economic empowerment by G7 development finance institutions by the end of 2022. This support is more important than ever. As we know, COVID has seriously impacted women who typically hold informal jobs that are more vulnerable to economic shocks, particularly on the African continent. The UN forecasts that 47 million more women and girls will be pushed back below the poverty line because of this pandemic. So we have to redouble our efforts to ensure that women have access to economic opportunities. This is why the UK is committed to ensuring that every girl gets access to 12 years of quality, safe education, so supporting their transition from education into work. We're using the G7 presidency to focus the international community on this issue. And we're proud to be co-hosting the Global Education Summit in London in July, together with Kenya. The private sector has the power to transform lives. It supports women in developing countries to secure better jobs. It promotes leadership opportunities for women. It helps them gain access to finance, which is crucial to unlocking opportunities, economic opportunities. The case for looking at investments through the gender lens has been made well. Such investments create value not only for women and their families, but also for their communities and the wider economy. So the UK stands ready to support the 2X challenge. We will continue to collaborate with public and private sector to help women get into better paid jobs, safer and more secure work. We'll continue to support women's access to finance, and will address barriers such as unpaid care responsibilities. Finally, I'm delighted to welcome new members to this group. I'm sure they'll help us move the needle and shift even more capital towards women's economic empowerment. That's what we all want to see. I look forward to the 2X Challenge delivering more results as it moves into this new phase. You can be sure of our full support. Thank you.
James Dudderidge there, the UK's Africa Minister. And it seems like not a day goes by when we're not reminded about the dreadful impact on women because of the COVID pandemic. Only today, the World Bank has been saying that women have not only lost their jobs, they've completely had to leave the labour market because of those care responsibilities that James Dudderidge referred to there. So now we're going to have a context-setting interview, and after that we're going to play you a film. And the interview is with a wonderful woman whom I know, Bogolo Kenewendo. She's an economist and also a member of the G7's Gender Equality Advisory Council, which is about to publish a report. Now, Bogolo was Minister for Trade and Industry and Investment in her native Botswana, so she's got that government experience, but because she's an economist, she's also managing director and set up her own economics development consultancy, Kenewendo Advisory, and she sits on multiple corporate boards, don't you, Bogolo? So Bogolo, welcome to you. And Bogolo, you know, today at least 40% of SMEs in sub-Saharan Africa are owned by women, but only 20% of them have access to institutional finance. That's a funding gap of about $42 billion. So as both an economist and a former government minister, just outline for us the context as to why gender lens investing is so critical to achieving gender equality, which is something we all want.
Thank you very much, Zainab, and I'm very delighted to be joining you again today. You have perfectly said it in the beginning that, you know, women have been disproportionately affected by COVID, and we have seen it before COVID that women were part of vulnerable groups that did not have access to institutional financing. And what COVID has done is completely destroyed the little bit of base that existed. So while we say it was around 43% and on a personal level around 34% of financial access during COVID, and now as we try to rebuild back better, it has gotten worse to a point where we are starting to really discuss if COVID has brought about a she-cession. So a recession that has a female face and a young face. And what we are seeing here is that not only have women businesses been affected, but women have been pushed back into poverty, and some of the informal businesses, as you know, in Africa is over 70% of women running informal businesses. In India, it's over 55%, and in Latin America, over 35%, and so forth. These are big numbers that make us worry and really challenge us that as we build back better, we should ensure that capital goes back to women so that we do not have to deal with economic scarring later, and we don't have to deal with the majority of women falling back into poverty and therefore being reliant on social welfare programs. Really, gender smart investing makes good economic sense because you are relieving the economic, government economic structures of stress that would come with women falling back into poverty and being reliant on social welfare programs.
Yeah, I just want to pick up very quickly on the fact that you talk about the informal economy. And as you say quite rightly, women tend to occupy this space. So we've got to make sure that we also get to these often overlooked sectors, don't we?
Absolutely. We have to ensure that when we look at channeling capital back into Africa, into developing countries, that we find a way of reaching those in the informal sectors, because that's where the majority of our women are based. And this is, again, something that we need to consider in restructuring our economies, focusing on transformational agenda that will ensure that we are bringing more women into our mainstream economies that have usually been left out of these economies. And I think it's also important at this particular moment that I state that there is an African saying that if you empower a woman, you are empowering a community. So it only makes sense that we do gender smart investing if we want to see us attaining not just the SDG goal on gender equality, but all of the SDGs.
Right. And as I said at the beginning, you are a member of the G7 Gender Equality Advisory Council, and I believe you're about to publish a report, which you can't perhaps go into, but just as a curtain raiser, give us an idea of some of the themes that are coming out of that work, and then also how the 2X Challenge can help to support them.
Right. So at the core of our work at the G7 GIAC has really been to challenge the G7 leadership to provide leadership that is needed towards building more inclusive economies, particularly ones that will empower both young people and women. And we have really premised the bulk of our work around COVID-19 recovery. And so there will be an aspect that focuses on COVID-19 recovery and planning, bearing in mind that women have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19. So we should see more deliberate action. So where we start to bring in the 2X initiative, more deliberate action really in capital that goes towards developing countries, having gender indicators. So aid for trade being very specific, that we'd like to see a certain percentage of that aid for trade going towards women and gender focused issues. And when we look at ODA, Overseas Development Assistance, we also want to be able to pinpoint how much of that ODA will be targeted towards women. And it's not just because we want women in the space, but there is a case for it. Just to add that even McKinsey has published a report quite recently showing that if we do focus on the empowerment of women and women's participation rates, then we can see an additional of up to $28 trillion into the global economy. And in addition to that, we have really focused on access to capital markets to say it's important that we see an investment of more investments towards women-owned businesses, and then on the trade aspect to see more investments towards facilitating women in trade, because at this particular moment before COVID, we had one out of every three traders being women, and would like to see this increasing.
So important that you bring up those, aid for trade, such an important thing. I mean, the way you put it, it's such a no-brainer, isn't it? You wonder why it's taken so long to get there and we're still not there. But just very briefly, what would you like to see from the 2X Challenge over the next 2 years? Because the issue of monitoring and accountability is a very important one, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I like that you brought it up, and that is exactly what I would like to see. One, the continued momentum of the 2X Challenge initiative, because what we are seeing doubling from 3 billion to 15 billion is great efforts. But beyond that, we would like to see more commitment, and we want to see the design and implementation of COVID-19 recovery plans really detail and include issues of gender indicators, and that when we work towards structural transformations, we are focusing on the economic empowerment of women and ensuring that they have economic agency, because once again, that will lead us to building back better and to ensuring that we do deliver towards all the SDGs.
Bogolo, thank you so much indeed. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Bogolo Kenowendo,
thank you very much.
Minister and MD of Kenowendo Advisory. Thanks for that, setting the scene for us. Well, look, we're going to play you a film now, which is just going to give you a bit of an overview about how the 2X Challenge was launched in 2018, the reasons for it, where it is now and where it would like to go. So let's watch that film now.
Women transform societies. Investing in them creates a strong ripple effect at every level, from communities and companies to the wider economy. Yet, tragically, women are often excluded from the private sector. Women running businesses in emerging markets receive less than half as much funding as those founded by men, but they deliver twice as much revenue per dollar invested. Closing the gender gap in the labour force would boost global GDP by $28 trillion per year by 2025. That's more than the economies of the US and China combined. This inequality in access to finance is what the 2X Challenge has been set up to tackle. It began in 2018 as a call to action by the G7 summit in Quebec to commit to gender-smart investment. The 2X Challenge aims to create and build a shared understanding of how to invest through a gender lens. The first phase, from 2018 to 2020, achieved more than double its target, investing nearly $7 billion into private sector projects, empowering women in developing countries. And 2020 was a record investment year for the 2X Challenge, despite the COVID pandemic. The 2X Challenge has also created a new standard for the global investment industry. Its framework enables investors to empower women as entrepreneurs, business leaders, employees, and as consumers of financial products and services that increase their economic participation. Building on this success, the 2X Challenge launches its next round, welcoming on board 4 new members. So now a total of 18 development finance institutions and multilateral development banks are making a new landmark commitment to invest and mobilize $15 billion for businesses in developing countries over the next 2 years. The most urgent issues of our time cannot be addressed without women. They are fundamental in combating climate change and in driving sustainable recovery from the COVID crisis. By investing in women, we can achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 5, gender equality, which is the key that unlocks all the other goals. The 2X Challenge is bringing gender lens investing into sharp focus.
There we go. I mean, frankly, the facts and figures there really speak for themselves, don't they? Well, I'm delighted now to welcome our next guest in our keynote conversation, and it is Odile Renaud-Bassot, who is the president of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And Odile, you took this post up in November last year. What a time to be assuming such a position. You are the first woman to head the EBRD, and indeed a double first, because you are the first woman to head any multilateral development bank, and you come with a whole wealth of experience because you were Director General at the French Treasury, and you were also served as Deputy Director at General of Depot, which is a large French public financial institution. So you saw there in that film that we mentioned that the EBRD is one of the 4 new members of the 2X Challenge. So tell us, why has the EBRD decided to join, and just in general, what role can the MDBs play to build further on this issue of gender finance?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear, Madam President.
Yes, okay. Okay, because the connection seems to be not very good. So why the BRD? First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to participate to this exchange and to this challenge. And why does the BRD has decided to join the challenge? I think for 2 reasons. The first one is, in the context of the COVID crisis, we are very worried, fully aware and very worried about the impact on the woman, the fact that what is at stake is a risk of regression, going backwards in terms of gender balance, inclusion of women in economic activities, in businesses and so forth. So we really believe that looking at the facts and the figures, and they were mentioned before, the COVID crisis has had a huge impact on women. mostly because they are working more in services sector, hospitality, informal economy, also because they were at the forefront on all issues related to children care, taking care of children out of school and so forth. So I think that the relative impact of the COVID crisis has been terrible for everybody, but I think the relative impact on women has been higher. And that's why we believe it's so important to focus and pay attention and use all our tools to intervene and to try to counteract this impact. And we believe that this will be key in the agenda of Building Back Better. The second issue is that it's been, this challenge and this involvement in the gender agenda is fully consistent with our long-term strategy, which has been approved by all our shareholders. This strategy has three cross-cutting issues. The first one is climate and the green agenda. And I think we all agree that greening the economy, addressing decarbonization and so forth is very important. The second one is equality of opportunities, and in particular, gender equality. And the third one is digitalization. And there are links, of course, between these three issues. And I think for example, one area on which we are seeing how we can enhance our financial impact is the role of women in greening the economy. So what we are doing is we are developing a strategy, reviewing. We had one, but we want to renew it and to enhance it, developing a new strategy for gender equality with the objective to define new corporate targets in terms of number of projects with a gender component, scaling up activities and coming up with innovative ways for integrating gender, and developing new tools to do so also. And I was very struck. I was thinking this morning, I had a board meeting, and I was thinking about this event we were having this afternoon, and it was quite striking to know that we had projects, in railway, in Jordan, in Georgia, in electricity company, in Romania, and in this project, which are very much based on energy, transportation, so infrastructure project. In these two projects, for example, we brought in a gender component with a commitment from the lender to develop a plan to reach some targets in terms of women involvement at management level and so forth. So reflecting the fact that in all our projects, what we are trying to do is to bring in a gender dimension when it's relevant and possible.
Very interesting, thank you. I'm reminded about the words of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf when she became president of Liberia. She said, look, I want to put women in all top positions, but I can't do that, she said. But what I will do is put women in strategic positions. So she appointed a woman as a Minister of Finance, Minister of Commerce and Industry. So as the first female president of the EBRD, how far do you think it's more important for you to ensure that we have more women in leadership positions in finance, but also in business more broadly?
No, of course, it's very important for me. And I really believe that you need to have some sort of positive action. It will not come naturally, even if my personal experience is that I've never felt that I was discriminated and so forth. But I think that still it's more difficult for women for different reasons, from psychological reasons. In a number of countries, legal restrictions, resistance to appoint women to higher position and so forth. So I think it's very important to be proactive in that respect, and you can be proactive in different manners. I believe very much in accompanying women. When you are the head of an organization, you can promote women working with you. You can also accompanying them, developing role model, providing support also to give them confidence to apply, to be ambitious in the way they project themselves in management responsibilities and so forth. I also believe, more generally speaking, not only in the institution I manage, but that having proactive policy, quotas, for example, for the business activity, quotas in boards, in my view, has been proven very effective. We've done that in France. I was very skeptical at the beginning that this would be the right way to go, because, you always believe that it's also very important to base decisions on merits and so forth. But it has proven, having some quota for women in the board of the big companies has proven extremely effective to develop, to empower women to take this kind of position, to develop networking capacities, and also to develop, you always, very often you are told, well, you do not have enough women that you can appoint and so forth. But then when you force by creating this kind of mechanism, then you find that you can have a lot of them. So I think that's, all kind of actions we can have. And in my position as president of an MDB, as I was saying, putting that at the core of our financial activity, working with all stakeholders, be it the government, the companies we are working for in the private sector, in the public sector, the regulators and so forth. So building on all the stakeholders and also the work with other MDBs to put this agenda at the core of our financing and our impact. And also using both the financial instruments, so when we extend a loan, we can have conditions related to a positive agenda for gender, but also develop tools such as policy advice, helping companies to develop a strategy to better to bring better in their own management strategy the gender dimension. This is something we can do. Use our tools to test, sort of laboratory for new ideas, new way to intervene.
All right, thank you. I wanted to ask you very, very quickly, please, just a minute, briefly, from your experience in finance, how far away do you think current mainstream investing is from being gender smart? Brief answer, I'd appreciate. Thank you.
We are quite far away. I would just mention one study we've been doing, which is in Eastern and Central Europe, private capital, venture capital environment, and looking at the situation in 15 countries of Central and Eastern Europe, we realize that women are very much underrepresented in venture capital. Only 1% of the capital is directed in all-women funders teams. So I think that we are quite far away in mainstreaming gender investment. So I think there is a lot of progress that we can make.
Oh, thank you so much indeed for just setting out there the scale of the challenge and why we absolutely need the 2X challenge for gender lens investing. Odile Renaud-Basseux, President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, thank you so much indeed. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you. Let's now play the second of our films, because what we want to show you now is, more support from the kind of institutions that are really putting their weight behind the 2X challenge, but also some of the voices of the investees, as there were, the women who are actually benefiting from the 2X challenge. So let's watch that film. Thank you.
My name is Tosin Akimushiri. I'm a regional operations manager with Food Concepts in Lagos, Nigeria. I started in 2009 as a restaurant manager. Now I'm in charge of 23 stores, both in Lagos and in the eastern part of Nigeria. The company, thanks to its gender balance policies, creates an environment for women to grow as professionals.
When you look at consumer products, according to a number of research studies, 80% of consumer product buying decisions are made by women. Having women in the workforce, in the senior leaderships, helping making decisions will make the company more commercial. And that is one big impact we want to show.
Nous avions commencé à penser au microcrédit en 95, quand nous avions posé la question aux femmes, pourquoi vous ne travaillez pas? Et la réponse était très claire, parce que nous n'avons pas accès au capital. La microfinance ou le microcrédit redonne le pouvoir aux femmes, c'est pour ça qu'en anglais on parle d'empowerment. Donc quand on a de l'argent, on peut prendre des décisions, on a un rôle.
بحكم اني انا معروفه بالاداء وعند وين ما يجوا الناس كيف انتم هكا يجوا يزوروني تقبل لي انا بالنسبه لي انا ممكن ياسر ما عرفش ناويه نخلص القرض هذا ونزيد نحاول في القرض مع اكبر ولحد الان معناتها نحب نتعامل مع عند الاخر معناتها لين نقول انا يس.
Jumano started na me fiancé no na me sis agents na muno sanse me modi bonti e no mabo me baso o pagan e no mabo me baso ama my sis agent manager.
My name is Letitia Insedu. I'm the commercial director for PEG Solar Ghana. Since I joined PEG, the company has been undergoing a revolution, particularly in the area of gender diversification. So with the help of effective gender equity policies, we've been able to make PEG attractive to great female talent. Currently, 40% of PEG decision makers are women, which give the company the opportunity to expand by creating a culture of inclusivity.
With my own story in the company, a lot of female team members in the store see me as the role model, and it's something good.
So the clear benefits there, the 2X challenge and those institutions supporting it. Okay, so now we have a panel of 4 who are going to be talking about the lessons learned and just looking ahead at the next phase of the 2X challenge. So let me start with Anita Bhatia, who is Deputy Executive Director for UN Women, and you bring, again, a wealth of experience. You worked at the IFC, the private sector arm of the World Bank, and now you're at UN Women. Anita, just give us an idea briefly of how UN Women thinks about the role of finance to support support gender equality, which is of course what you're about?
Thank you, Zainab. And let me just start by saying it's a real pleasure to be here with all of you today. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this important conversation. You asked, what does UN Women think about finance? And I would say UN Women thinks finance is fundamental to gender equality. And I actually believe that the gender equality and women's empowerment agenda hasn't actually paid enough attention to the issue of finance, because money does make the world go around. And when I look at what happened in Beijing 25 years ago, when the world got together to talk about the key issues that needed to be addressed to achieve gender equality, the agenda was transformative, aspirational, ambitious, but there wasn't really much talk about money. The agenda was not a costed agenda. And so I think it is absolutely crucial to close the gap between those who talk about finance and those who talk about gender equality. And when we look, as we have at UN Women, at what has been the impact of the stimulus packages that the world has been managing since the pandemic broke out, there's $11 trillion of money sloshing around in the system to deal with the effects of the pandemic. But when I look at how much money has actually gone to women, it's very small. Our review showed that out of the 206 countries and territories that we looked at, only 12% of them actually had holistic programs reaching women in a variety of ways, addressing violence against women, addressing the childcare burden that previous speakers have talked about, and addressing the issue of women's income opportunities as well as their health. So if we don't have holistic approaches to finance, both on the public sector side and on the private sector side, that actually get capital into women's hands, we're not going to be able to come out of this recovery. We will not be building back better. We will be stepping back many, many years. And the worrying thing about it is that gender equality is pretty complex. It's not just about driving finance, but it's also about attitudes, norms, and stereotypes. And I'm really worried that we're going to create a world where mummy's at home and daddy's the one who's bringing home the bacon because of the care burden. So we need really to put finance front and center. Congratulations to the 2X challenge for having achieved what it has, but we need to go from billions to trillions.
Okay, thanks very much indeed there for those opening comments, Anita. Laurie Kerr, you've just been appointed Chief Executive of FinDev Canada, and you spent nearly 2 decades prior to that in various management roles at the Inter-American Development Bank Group in Washington. So as the new head of FinDev Canada, how do you see the 2X challenge fitting into your priorities?
Thanks so much, Zainab, and it's really great to be here. What a wonderful panel. So as a development finance institution that places gender lens investing as a core part of our mandate, I was definitely thrilled to see FinDev Canada among the founding members of the 2X Challenge. And I'm thrilled to serve as FinDev Canada's first woman CEO. And I actually find it very fitting that my first speaking engagement in this capacity is on a 2X Challenge event. Of course, I firmly believe that gender lens investing is now more important than ever as we think of recovery from COVID-19 and growth beyond that. As we've heard earlier, we all know that women have been and are disproportionately impacted by the economic aftermath of COVID-19. And we also know that investing in women is not only the right thing to do, but the smart thing to do in terms of the positive effect it has in communities and on economic growth. We heard the reference earlier to the potential 28 trillion contribution to the global economy through women's economic empowerment. So all of this to say that women's economic empowerment remains a key priority of FinDev Canada going forward, as it has been since our inception. And we certainly look forward to continuing and to expanding the excellent collaboration we've had with our partners in the 2X Challenge in the months and the years to come.
Thanks very much indeed. Come back to you shortly. So Thomas Ostros, Vice President of the European Investment Bank. You also had stints at the IMF and also served in various positions as Minister and Deputy Minister of Finance in your native Sweden. So as a collaborating partner to the 2X Challenge over the past couple of years, are you particularly pleased or proud of something in your work to embed this gender lens investing approach at the EIB?
Thank you very much for inviting me to this nice panel. I must say that the 2X challenge is really, really important when it comes to sort of stimulating and energizing an issue. And for us, it has meant that it has strengthened even further our commitment to gender equality. As being the Bank of the European Union, gender equality is at the core in our mission. And we follow, of course, European Union policy on that. But we have also developed our own EIB group policy on gender equality and women's economic empowerment to really match up to these type of challenges. And in that framework, we try to embed gender equality consideration into our operations. We have three pillars: to protect the rights of women and girls in all EIB operations. The second, impact, so to see to that beneficiaries is equally benefited, men and women, from our investments. And thirdly, invest in women's economic empowerment. And I think that fits very well into 2X, the 2X challenge. So by the end of 2020, we reached totally 1.9 billion euros of gender lens investment. And that was complemented by 1.5 billion of lending that contributed to gender equality in a more indirect way. We also did something that I'm very proud of, that is also very much guided by the 2X challenge. We launched our She Invest initiative to boost women's economic empowerment in Africa by mobilizing 1 billion of gender responsive 2X compliant investments. That is, for instance, credit lines to local banks in Uganda, Senegal, and Benin for female-led small enterprises. We invested in 2X flagship high-impact funds, such as DPI's African Development Partnership Fund. These type of initiatives gives you get more energy and you get the guiding light by these type of global challenges, because then you start to compare it to each other. You get an easier comparison how you calculate the investments correctly. And I think 2X challenge is to congratulate. And we are proud to be members, and was very glad to be the first multilateral bank to become a member.
All right, good, excellent. Okay, Nick O'Donoghue, this month you celebrate 4 years of being Chief Executive of CDC Group, and of course you came with a lot of experience from the private banking sector. And CDC was also a founder of the 2X Challenge, and you've been very much taking the lead on much of the work to develop the 2X criteria and indicators, which are now being harmonized with a range of other standard frameworks across the investment industry. So please outline for us why this standardization process is absolutely so important for gender finance.
Yeah, thanks, Zainab, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. I want to start, if I may, just by quickly congratulating everybody who's been involved in the 2X Challenge since its inception 3 years ago. You know, our political leaders love to sort of create these big moments, often around sort of G7 and G20 events. They love to make big statements and have big press releases. And I think if we're honest, very often the substance doesn't always follow the press release. But the 2X Challenge is really truly an exception to that. And I think that's partly because it very much was an idea whose time has come, but also I think partly because of the enormous energy that the teams, all the teams from all the member institutions have put into it. So it's really, and from CDC's perspective, we're very proud to have been in at the beginning and proud of the role that we've been able to play in that. So let me talk about, your question was on harmonization and standardization and why we need harmonized standards. And I think the answer to that is really very simple. You need consistent harmonized standards to understand really whether you're making progress. And if you don't have that harmonization, what happens is it ends up just being a PR exercise and sort of a race to the bottom in terms of standards. So it's essential for within individual institutions as part of their investment decision-making process. And it's essential for thinking about how they manage the portfolios of assets that they own. It's essential to have this sort of clear and standardized taxonomy. And then, of course, the other thing that it really allows you to do is to gather data in a consistent way and to aggregate that data, because it's just so important that we build a evidence base around gender lens investing. And you can't have an evidence base without data, and you can't have data without a robust taxonomy, and you can't have a robust taxonomy without standardized and consistent metrics. So when we have those things, then we can start to build to prove the story of the value of gender lens investing. I think the other point I'd make about DFIs just quickly is about standardization. It's also allowed us to go beyond this family of DFIs. The link that we built with Jin's Iris Plus system, consistent metrics, not just in our community, but in the broader impact investment community, also really powerful and really important.
All right. Thank you for that. Okay, panel, I'm going to give you very, very quick second question from me, because I've got lots of questions from the people listening. Just a very rapid fire question from me and a rapid answer. So Anita, to you, what do you see as the biggest opportunities for 2X members in the coming years? We've heard, gender bonds like sovereign bonds, for instance. I mean, give us an idea just very quickly as what the biggest opportunities are for 2X members.
I think there's a huge opportunity now for the development community to use development money catalytically and to really use it to catalyze investment from institutional investors and pension funds and draw them into the gender space. 20 years ago, there was no such thing as a green bond, a vaccine bond, blue bond. So I think the time has come to have a separate asset class called gender bonds. And I think this is something that should be explored by sovereigns, particularly sovereigns who are going to be needing to roll over their debt in creative ways, but also by the private sector. We've seen a couple of issuances of gender bonds recently. I'd like to see many more.
All right, great, thank you. Laurie Kerr, so just give us a very brief idea of how FinDev Canada has embedded the 2X framework into your business.
Sure, absolutely. So even though I've been here with kind of a short period of time, I've been able to see how the institution really does embrace women's economic empowerment as a priority. We follow Canada's Feminist International Assistance Policy, so the 2X Challenge was a natural step for us. We embed gender lens in 100% of our investments. And in fact, building on what Nick just said, the 2X Challenge has helped us execute on our own gender equality strategy by providing an internationally accepted framework and a set of criteria that help standardize considerations across our peers and partners. We actually use the 2X criteria as part of our initial deal assessment, as well as ongoing in portfolio. And we've also instituted specific objectives in terms of the number of 2X qualifying transactions per year. And right now, very pleased to say that 60% of our portfolio is indeed 2X qualified. So there's a lot of different things that we're doing with respect to the 2X to really embed that in the work that we're doing. And I have lots more examples, but maybe I'll keep it just to that one for now.
Well, I just want to bring some of these questions in. Okay, Thomas, we've heard there about what FinDev is doing to embed the framework into its business, but just tell us what the EIB and other MDBs could do to take it to the next phase.
That's a very important question. I would like to encourage more MDBs to get engaged. And for EIB, I would say that couldn't we raise the bar when it comes to how we guide infrastructure investment and guide that by the 2X criteria? Odile mentioned that in her intervention earlier, integrating gender considerations into infrastructure projects when we now try to recover and rebuild. That would bring services and economic opportunities to women, lift burdens that often weigh upon women, free up time, enable access to education, employment, and contribute to the economic recovery. So if we can have 2X criteria for now investment in transport, energy, access to clean water, digitization. I think that could be something for MDBs to work on together and raise the bar even further.
Very important. That is your digitization. Okay, Nick, we often hear that, sectors and industries where women are economically active are often overlooked. So give us an idea of which sectors you're seeing where the most 2X kind of qualifying instruments are working, and where you see the challenges in terms of 2X investable opportunities, as it were.
Yeah, so look, I think the quick answer is you can find investable opportunities for gender lens investing in every sector. And partly that's because you can find, there are intentional investments where you're looking for businesses that are inherently inclusive and already gender smart. And you're also looking for new investees where you can help them to support them to become gender smart. So we found investments in technology. iMerit is a great AI business employing women in India, training them in technology. We found, and Odile mentioned infrastructure earlier, which is not an area you would naturally think there would be significant opportunities, but we've worked with a ports manager in West Africa to develop training programs so that women are now driving vehicles and operating heavy equipment in that port. And then obviously we work with our financial services through the financial services sector with our funds and our banks to ensure they've got women in leadership. So, I mean, there's a huge range of different opportunities. I mean, there are challenges, and you asked about challenges. If we're looking for women investment firms, obviously many of them are new. Many of them don't have a track record. Many of them find it difficult to raise assets. So we're hoping to support the building of an accelerator facility to help with that. I think another challenge is data, and that's often challenging for investees. And being proportionate in what you ask them for. Companies are often small, may not have the data on their customers. Collection can be expensive, so there are challenges, but they're surmountable.
All right. Okay. All right. So we've got about just under 20 minutes or so, because we're getting a lot of questions from people listening in on this. So, do any of the speakers have a view on the root causes of why women receive only 2 to 3% of venture capital funding globally? Odile mentioned that as a big barrier. Anybody want to venture a cause on that? That's one of the questions. Just put your hand up. Any of you want to give a response? No? All right. Let's go on to the next one. Given the G7, how can DFIs do more to support women, technology and entrepreneurship, and join the call from Commonwealth women parliamentarians for the implementation of digital financial inclusion as a common policy to support women entrepreneurs? We've talked about the need for digital financial inclusion. That's a very important aspect. I think you mentioned that, didn't you, Thomas?
Yes, I did. And I think digital will be extremely important, also connected to climate targets. And also on your first question, I think it shows so clearly whether some of the sort of structures in our society are not solving themselves. There's a need for a push. And I think when it comes to all of these type of venture debt, equity investment type of activities, there is a very strong male tradition. And I think we as actors have a responsibility to demand change and to invest where we see change. And this, I think, must be done. And this is also when it comes to digital, when we invest, to have a gender lens perspective, to understand where are the most important investment and how can they be done to see to that women get a stronger economic foothold.
Yeah, I mean, Odile mentioned how, getting better gender representation at boards, and she supports the use of quotas, would perhaps help with that venture capital question. So what about this question? Maybe, Nick, you might want to pick this one up because it's about the criteria. Do you know, and you may not have the data yet, which of the 2X criteria have the most impact? For example, does investing in a women-led business have greater impact on improving gender equality, or is it more impactful to invest in a business with a large proportion of female employees?
Yeah.
Do we have an
so
idea?
The answer is yeah, so the answer is we don't have any. That's not something we have data on, but I think intuitively you'd say that they're all important. And what you've got to look at board membership, you've got to look at who's in the management team, you've got to look at the employees and how they're the conditions under which they're working and the opportunities that they have for advancement. And you've also got to look at the product suite and the consumers they're dealing with and how they're dealing with them. And so I don't have, in answer to direct answer to the question, we don't have any data around which of those makes the most difference. But I think logically you'd expect all of them to make a difference. And I think there's a lot of overlap too. It's very difficult to sort of disaggregate in any one investment. And what we're looking for is companies that are committed to sort of operating across all those four verticals.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I mentioned at the outset the SMEs, and in particular, we know that SMEs are very important in the sub-Saharan African context. So this question, investing in women-led micro and small enterprises. I have a problem with the word micro, by the way, because there's nothing micro about what women do. But anyway, investing in women-led micro and small enterprises will have a huge impact on poverty reduction, employment, and nutrition security. Are there plans to address this issue in the 2X challenge with smaller deal sizes? Anybody want to pick up on that one? Maybe Anita or Laurie? Oh, Anita, we're not very good at lip reading yet. There you go. You're on. We can hear you now.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, good. No, I was saying, look, I don't know the specific plans in the 2X challenge, but I can say that as a matter of principle, one of the things that happens is risk appetite for smaller businesses tends to be very small. These are the businesses that really struggle, not microfinance, but the sort of the missing middle in getting access to capital. And we have to make really big efforts to address that. And I do want to say one thing about the venture capital question that came up earlier, and that's that there is a lot of unconscious bias. So we do need the data on females, entrepreneurs who are venture capitalists, who are looking for money. It took a long time for the data to get out there on microfinance and how women were very good credit risks in microfinance. We need to build the same evidence base for venture capital.
Right, okay. A question here from an investment manager. And the question is, I have seen many investment funds with the 2X designation where all the partners and or investment committee is composed 100% by men. We've already identified that as a problem, haven't we? So should the 2X challenge incorporate a requirement on the gender balance of the investment fund's investment decision principles? Who wants to take that one? What about you, Thomas, taking that one or Laurie? Because I've got another one for you that's specific to you, Nick.
I can.
Yeah, go on, Thomas.
Okay.
I would certainly welcome a discussion on exactly, yes, thank you. I would certainly welcome a discussion on exactly how to define and reform the 2X sort of definitions. What I think is very important is how the impact is. And we have to be strong not only on the first line where we see the division between men and women, but actually how does the actual financing term come out. On your question, for instance, on reaching small companies that have very vague access to capital markets, I think we have very good experience of cooperating with local banks where we can support the local bank via credit line, and they can in turn find and support those small companies that need credit but not today has great difficulties to really reach it. And this is a way of working, I think, that can be explored much further, going further also.
Great, lots of food for thought there. Nick, this is a question specifically for you. What do you see as the gaps in investment opportunities that would allow DFIs to do more? Is it in the early stages, risk capital in grants, venture philanthropy, or is it further along the pipeline just before the SME level?
Yeah, so just before I answer that, Zainab, we could just say a word on the previous question about no members in or seeing funds with no women in senior management. I mean, I guess I'd say first of all, I'd be surprised if there were really none. But I think that the key point there is we have to remember that 2X is not just about where your organizations are today. It's about where they're going. and the power of bringing investing in the fund and ensuring or agreeing that there will be change in the way this organization has operated and who's at the senior level. So it's both those things. It's recognizing businesses, as I said today, that are already gender smart and inclusive, but it's also recognizing business or finding businesses that want to move in that direction and are prepared to commit to do that. Where are the gaps in investment? I mean, I think I think when we look at the data, we'll see that there are gaps across every part of the investment cycle and investment spectrum. I suppose the biggest gaps are probably in that early stage investing, and we heard about we've talked about the venture capital business, but that's clearly where I think the greatest help is probably needed. We have, and I mentioned earlier, have been working to try to encourage the creation of an incubator that will try and incubate women-led and owned investment firms to try to address some of that challenge.
Right, okay, thanks for that. Got another question here. How does the 2X Challenge work specifically to support women economic empowerment in post-conflict contexts, where there are more infrastructural challenges and weaker monitoring mechanisms, but where the need to empower women is arguably even greater? Anita, that sounds like something you could deal with. I mean, post-conflict situations, fragile states, yeah.
Yeah, I think, look, fragility comes with its own set of issues. And I think the DFIs in the last few years really made a big push. I remember when I was at IFC was doing a lot to really push investments in fragile and conflict-affected states. And here I would say this is probably true not just of fragile and conflict-affected states, but the issue of what needs to go along with the finance to make the finance really work is really important. And that is the whole issue of capacity building and technical assistance that's got to accompany the finance so that it can be sustainable and so that there is investment in those very basic sets of skills, such as, business planning and just being able to run a business that is often missing. So I think we've been talking a lot about finance, but we also need to talk about what goes with that finance. And obviously those conditions are less favorable in fragile and conflict affected states than they are in others because of the institutional landscape.
Does anybody else want to pick up on that post-conflict situation? Yeah, go ahead, Thomas.
I think it has been so interesting to first be at the IMF, working with issues like least developed countries, fragile states, and where the IMF also learned a lesson on how to deal with, and I think took a few steps in better sort of partnership with countries that were in great need, and now be in an institution like the EIB that works on a sort of more of a micro level, also with these type of issues. And I think there has been improvement in recent years in understanding and adapting what we do. We have today in sub-Saharan Africa about 70% of our investment goes into least developed countries or fragile states. And we have learned a lot during this process. But I think this is where really a global issue where we need to discuss how to improve step by step our efforts to be supportive.
All right. A question here from a female emerging fund manager who says, how can a female and emerging fund manager reach out to DFIs to raise capital? I intend to fund female founders that are improving livelihoods. So what's the mechanism there then? Nick or Thomas or Laurie? Yeah, Laurie.
Sure, maybe I could just come in here and introduce one of the new tools that we have in our toolkit, recognizing that we need to have different types of capital to address some of the systemic issues. We're really happy to announce this great partnership we have with Global Affairs Canada to launch the 2X Canada Inclusive Economic Recovery, which is a blended finance facility that is geared to support investments that drive positive impact on women's economic empowerment in our target geographies of Latin America and the Caribbean and Sub-Saharan Africa. 100% of those transactions will be 2X qualified. There's a technical assistance component, and we view that as, again, a really great tool in our toolkit that we're introducing to help deal with some of the systemic issues and provide support to female fund managers, for example. That was the basis for the question that you just asked.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, I went through quite a few of those questions that we've been receiving, and it's good for everybody to interact with the people listening on this. But as we come to the end, I want to just give you all a chance to really, say something you've not had a chance to say during the course of our conversation. And so I'll do it in a loose way, which is say, here we are, the G7 Summit 2021. Where do you expect or hope the 2X Challenge will be by the next G7 Summit next year? So let me start with you, Anita.
So I think it is a question of scaling up. If I had one ambition, one thing to say, I think the goal of going from 7 to 15 billion is great. And I'd actually like to see that ambition magnified, because it is very, very clear that if we don't make extraordinary efforts, doing business as usual in the post-pandemic era isn't going to result in building back better. We've taken a very, very big step back in just 1 year. So we need to do very extraordinary things to make up for all of those losses. And that's why I think the issue of getting women back into the labor force, the issue of getting targeted financing to women-owned businesses, the issue of creating jobs for women so that they don't slip back into poverty is so vital right now. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get it right. So I say we scale and we go big.
Thanks very much indeed, Anita. Laurie Kerr, Chief Executive of FinDev Canada.
Sure. Just building on what Anita said, I think we would also love to see more institutions join the 2X Challenge, more institutions applying the 2X criteria in their investment decision making. But I think a really important part that we should also double down on is really getting deeper into the measuring and understanding the impact of women's owned businesses. So the data side, I think, will be really important going forward as well.
All right. Okay. And just, you talked about, Laurie, the fact that you are a founding member of the 2X Challenge and so on. I mean, what are you most proud of so far in your association? I know you've only just taken over, but what are you proud of?
Sure. So I think two things. One is, and I think Nick mentioned it earlier on in his earlier comments, in that my sense of the commitment of the DFIs and the partners around the table has just been something that everyone should be, has been and is really proud of. So the ability of the development finance community to really pull together on such an important issue is certainly something that the team at FinDev Canada is really impressed by. And I think in addition to that, also seeing not just the willingness, but a lot of times the embracing on behalf of our clients of the 2X criteria, and not just about rewarding behavior, as Nick had said also, but about nudging them further into the right direction. So just that embracing of the 2X, I think, is something that amongst clients that we've been really, really pleased at FinDev Canada as well.
Thank you. That's great. And Thomas Ostros, Vice President of the European Investment Bank, where do you expect or hope the 2X will be by the next G7 meeting next year?
So first of all, I want us to reach the target. I think that is very important for the credibility of the process. But then I would wish that more multilateral development banks now join, because we are in a process creating a community, we are standardizing definitions, we are encouraging each other. This can be also for the target setting next time the G7 meet. It can be a very influential process going forward, but then we need more MDBs to come in as members.
And are you going to be doing your best to say to the other MDBs, come on board?
I'll take on the challenge, and I will mention that whenever I have the opportunity. Thank you.
So you'll be an advocate as well for the 2X challenge. Yeah, great. So to you, Nick, CDC.
Oh, look, I mean, first of all, I'd say we had a target 3 years ago. We did double what we said we would do. We've got a much bigger target this time. We should try to do double again what we say we'll do. I think I'd love to see obviously more MDBs and other DFIs involved, but I'd really like to see also mainstream, whether it's big pension funds or sovereign wealth funds, also coming into 2X, because they obviously that's where you start moving really significant amounts of money. And I think those type of institutions move when they think they're missing something. And so building this data, having this evidence base, showing it's working, showing the investment returns are positive, all those things I think can really transform the pace at which money is moving towards gender lens investing.
And Nick, what are you most proud of as part of the 2X community at CDC?
I'm really proud that we were, as you said, along with, I think, IDFC, FinDev Canada, were really founded this. I remember 3 years ago, when we were talking to other EDFI members about it, European DFI members about it, and gosh, it was a really sort of felt like a radical idea. And yet you look at where we've come to and where we are today, and it's been, as I said earlier, I think it's an idea whose time has come, and you're getting this feeling of just enormous urgency and momentum, and that it's really beginning to make a difference. So I think I'm very proud of the role that CDC's played in helping to catalyze and drive that.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick. And I think I've heard from all of you that the time is absolutely right. As Anita said, very, very urgent matter that must be addressed. I've heard lots of things today about the importance of getting women in the informal economy involved, quality employment, how overlooked sectors and industries where women are economically active must be included, how important access to capital and labour markets are absolutely crucial components to this discussion, and removing the barriers to women getting finance, the importance of SMEs. We heard Bogolo talk about aid for trade, the trade initiatives, and also accountability and the monitoring progress, and looking at the gender equality indicators and the points that Odile Renaud-Basso made about getting it right at the top in the boards and as well right at the bottom. I think it's been a really, really engrossing and very, very important discussion. It's been my great pleasure to be chairing this session, because as we all talk about rebuilding and we talk about gender finance and empowering women through investment, we must say that investment must land on the right side of history, and that we cannot rebuild if women are left behind. So thank you to all of you, our keynote speaker, and also to Bogolo for setting the context for us, and to all of you listening to this event. I wish you all the best in your various endeavours, and from me, Zainab Badawi here in London, it's goodbye. Thank you.